Welcome to Points in the Podcast. I am Elias Schuster, as always, joined by Matt Rooney. And Matt, we are an NBA podcast, a basketball podcast. And, there's only one thing that we can do today. That's really how there was another plan. There were other things on the agenda. But there's really only one thing that we can do. We have to follow the trend. It's what the people want, and we can't ignore the obvious. So we're here to we're gonna have to talk about Damian Lillard. That's what's gonna have to happen.
Just made a banner for you as we were talking. Yeah, that was a shocker. I did not see that one coming, especially not to like I know the Miami rumors had kind of died down, and Toronto was the team popping up there, and we were talking about even the Bulls, but like it just kind of always felt like Miami was going to get that done at some point, and nope, he's going to the Bucks, and he's okay with going to the Bucks apparently because he didn't complain. He tweeted that he's excited and all that good stuff. So, as a Bulls fan, I am not thrilled that Damian Lillard and Giannis are going to be in that division for the next few years. As a just basketball fan, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch those two together.
Yeah, and we can definitely. I want to get a lot more into it. I think I do first. You don't worry, you can leave the banner up. It's fine.
This is going to be up the whole show.
I want to get we'll get through some weekly bullet points first, just to get everyone caught up as normal. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the Lillard thing is. That's the big news of the week. We didn't hop on right away. We weren't going to do a breaking news pod on it. I feel like in general, a lot of people, emergency podcasts, people have backed off a little because one, you want to give yourself some time to process and let all the information come out, all the reports come out, make sure that there's no extensions onto the trade and things like that.
Yeah,
the trade,
especially in NBA deals, which I feel like that's always the case. Like, it's right. A day later, this person is actually now going to this team in a 4-team deal, and Drew Holiday's getting bought or whatever. Like everything, whatever you always see is the initial report of the deal in the NBA. It's rarely do extra details not leak out as the day goes on.
Exactly. So I think that's why I wanted to. We waited a couple days. Hopefully, people aren't exhausted yet by the Damian Lillard conversation, but we're gonna have a little bit of it, and we're gonna branch out a little and talk about not only the impact that it will have for Milwaukee, but the other teams involved in the deal, and also just maybe some of the teams around the Eastern Conference and around the league, because this is these big trades like this are always cause a domino effect of some kind. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I think first, as always, I want to quickly go through some weekly bullet points. So
let's do it.
Big thing is, coming up here after this weekend, before we hop on this pod again, is going to be media day and the start of training camps. A lot of teams around the league, most teams I would say, have the plan of like Monday for their media day, starting training camp middle of next week. So, here in Chicago, I know it's for the Chicago Bulls. They will have the 2nd as their the start of their day, or their media day, and then the 3rd is when they begin training camp, and they'll be out in Nashville, interestingly enough. So that seems to be the track that a lot of other teams are following as well. And, that's kind of the unofficial, I would say, start of the NBA season in a lot of ways. You have a lot of executives sit down and spew false hope and optimism and tell you how everything that you've heard about trade rumors and this and that or whatever, the team is on a great path and it's perfect.
And they're all in the best shape of their lives.
And everybody, yeah,
that's my
and then
favorite
all the
one.
Players tell you they're in the best shape of their life, and they couldn't be more excited to work with the new additions on their team and all this stuff, and that they're going to all win championships. So in a lot of ways, the media day is it can lead to a whole lot of nothing, but at the same time, it's still interesting to hear there's a level of expectations that are at least set for each team. If you can at least read between the lines, and if you have an executive sitting there and setting the bar, that's the bar that they have to live up to for the season. We saw that in Chicago last year with the Bulls front office saying they had to be better than the previous year, and they weren't. So that makes you look pretty darn stupid when that's the track record, or that's the path that you end up on. So expectations will be set for a lot of these teams around the league over the beginning of next week. So something to look out for moving forward.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's always funny. I don't know why I always laugh when I see it, like on media days. It's always like the players sitting in their home uniforms at the press conference, like ready to go, having just taken pictures. But it's nice to know, like, all right, we're good, we're back, camps are coming, basketball's here.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it gives you that feeling of like, all right, we're back in it, and all the players are together, and yeah. But it is always yeah. It's just a funny day because there's like there are always some good moments that come out of it. There's like maybe one good quote per team that comes out of it, um, but it's a formality. It's what gets done, and then the training camp is usually what's far more interesting because
Yeah.
every team has a couple of competitions going on for whether it be a starting position or just a rotational spot. There's a lot more storylines there that will give us some more meat on the bones.
Yeah.
Moving into the second thing here, I wrote this down, and this changes a lot with the Lillard stuff that obviously just happened, but this was something that came out since the last time that we hopped on the podcast last week, which was a number of teams that were named as interested in Tyler Hero. So you had the Utah Jazz, the Charlotte Hornets, and the Brooklyn Nets, as well as the Chicago Bulls, were named as teams interested in acquiring Damian Lillard. Now, of course, or not Damian Lillard, Tyler Hero. But this changes, of course, with the Lillard trade being done. The assumption probably would have been that Hero ends up on one of these teams in a 3-team deal of some kind with Portland. So that we can. I bring it up because I don't think we should completely throw it out because Miami, they didn't land Lillard, and now the question is, what do they do from here? Chances are they enter the season without a big deal, but around the deadline, do they try to get something done? They're trying to extend this recent successful run that they've been on. So I don't think it's out of the question that we see, trade rumors pop up again with Europe. And those are the teams that it looks like moving forward that maybe we should keep an eye on for Tyler Hero if conversations pop up.
Yeah, it probably seems like something that we're not getting. The Lillard thing is obviously off the table, but that's something that in the season, once maybe more candidates to be traded emerge, probably where you start to see that name pop up again because the Heat they're probably going to have to do something if they want to replicate their run from last year because we talked about their offseason and like they let some decent players walk in kind of preparation of getting Damian Lillard. Now they didn't do that. That team is a step back for sure from where they were last year. You can't count out Heat culture, but like they're a step back from where they were in terms of talent.
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about them in the Division Digest, but losing Gabe Vincent, losing Max Strus, those are two above average shooters in your rotation, guys that were kind of the epitome of Heat culture guys. And like you said, they always seem to find more of these guys, and they have Jaime Jaquez, who we love and think could be a perfect fit for them, and they have they re-signed Josh Richardson, who his success a lot of ways started in Miami as a Heat culture guy. Maybe that pops up again. So it's not like there aren't options there for them to do what they always do in the most annoying fashion and turn G League guys into like high end rotation guys who get millions.
Yeah, guys who make 60 million a year or 60 million over 4 years.
So that will happen to an extent, but I mean, you clearly you didn't land that co-star that you wanted with Jimmy. So, and that's another thing that will just be a storyline all year to keep keep our eye on is yes, does Tyler Hero get dangled again in the trade market as they look for some addition to put next to Butler, or what if things go poorly? Do they begin to offload some of their talent and look to kind of retool things moving forward? My guess is that's not the path they go because Jimmy doesn't want that, but you never know with these teams. It's if Pat Riley sees an opportunity to really shake things up and fix the roster for a better long-term future, maybe he goes down that path.
Yeah, you can never count out Pat Riley for
anything.
Count out's the right term, but like he's capable of pulling anything off.
He's capable, of doing whatever he wants. It's and he's capable of having great hair at his age. So that's how you know. I know that's how you know. It's like, I mean, come on, how old is he now? He's like,
it's got to be 75,
late 70s, maybe. I don't know, and he still has that head hair. Come on, what's going on? What's he doing? Maybe it's the Miami Sun. I don't know.
It's the Heat culture.
It's the Heat culture. Yeah. Okay. The next little thing here, Ben Simmons. There was a comment made, I believe it was by the head coach, Jacques Vaughn, about his availability for this season and for training camp. Apparently, he's good to go, 100%. He's going to be out there on training camp, running 5-on-5, and working in the preseason and entering the year as the team's in this team's starting lineup and as a full piece of the Brooklyn Nets. So we've talked about this in the past. If he can even be 70 to 80% of what Ben Simmons has been in the past, that's pretty huge, I think, for the Nets personally, just because I think they have a very They have a
They
couple
have a
of very
bunch of
solid
really good
players.
role players. Like
Yeah.
they're a team that's loaded with some really solid role players. They just don't. And the Kyrie trade obviously even made that more so. Like they got a lot of solid basketball players. And if Ben Simmons can come in with really very little pressure on him in this situation now and just kind of be almost as good as he was, I think that's, again, like
I
we
mean,
talked
yeah, it
about
would be
teams
huge.
that are competing up there with the Bulls, and like the Bulls have some stuff to worry about. Like that's another team that's competing for a play-in spot.
And I think that's like that's a good two-way team,
Yeah,
especially defensively.
they're
They
a
could be
tough
a
to play
great,
against team.
yeah, they could be a great defensive team. But they have the shooting and stuff that you want to surround a guy
Yeah,
like Ben Simmons with. He doesn't have to have any expectation of shooting it. They're probably just going to tell him like, do whatever you do on the offensive
yeah.
end.
Whatever you
And
like doing, just do that. We'll figure out the rest.
yeah, I compare it a lot. I think maybe it's not a perfect comparison by any means, but like I look at a team like Oklahoma City in Billy Donovan's last season with them, and when they had Chris Paul for their 1 year, and that was a team that everyone thought was just going to be basically tanking, and Chris
Yeah,
Paul was just a veteran presence, and maybe he would be traded midway through that season, but they end up keeping him, and I know there's no Chris Paul caliber talent on Brooklyn, but just in terms of what that Oklahoma City team was able to do and be like a formidable, legitimate playoff team
yeah.
and just surprise everybody because they had a bunch of guys and they were
Yeah,
well rounded and that's just who they were. Like I
that's a
wouldn't
good
be.
comp. That's a good comp.
And Ben Simmons is the opposite of a locker room presence as Chris Paul because Chris Paul fixes, he brings everybody together and Ben Simmons clearly does not. But I just
Maybe Ben
think
Simmons will, now that there's less pressure and the rosters doesn't have this. I don't know. Maybe I'm
maybe
being optimistic for Ben.
maybe he just had a little kink in his back, Like I get a
It's
little
possible.
I just and that's he has a bunch of back problems. I'm grumpy when my back hurts,
Oh,
so
I hate it. It's the worst.
maybe that's all he
It's
needed, and
the
now he's
absolute
gonna be the
worst.
nicest guy. His free throw shot or his effort at the free throw line is gonna be perfect. So who knows? But no, I just think in terms of what OKC was kind of able to surprise people and look like a night to night pretty tough to beat team. Like I wouldn't be shocked if that's Brooklyn this season.
No, I think
Just
that's a very good comparison.
just because of the caliber of talent, that they have.
Yeah.
Lastly, here before we get into Damian Lillard stuff, I just wrote this down because I thought it was big team, a bigger note. Brad Stevens, he told the Boston Globe earlier this week that both Kristaps Porzingis and Malcolm Brogdon should be healthy and ready to go for training camp. So I think there were some questions, honestly, with both guys because Brogdon's health is always up in the air, but mostly with Kristaps Porzingis ever having to miss the World Cup due to the plantar fasciitis. There were just questions about exactly how ready he'd be able to go and if he would be 100% heading into the season. So it sounds like both guys will be. The only thing I would also mention with this is I've also seen trade rumors pop up again this week with Brogdon. I don't remember what the source was with that. It's just I know that they tried to trade him earlier in the offseason, and that fell through because of because of his medicals and everything. But now I think it's possible they try to move Brogdon again. And I think Brogdon, is kind of not happy because he knows that they tried to trade him.
Yeah,
And
why
it
would
didn't
they?
work.
I don't. Why do they want to try and move him so much? Especially with Marcus Smart not being there, it feels like he's a guy, like a
I
kind of a depth guy
agree.
that you want in that role for if you're Boston, like an insurance policy.
Well, he was great
If
last year too. He was
yeah, like
amazing last year.
I don't know why like unless like I don't know what you're getting back for him, but like why that doesn't seem like a piece you'd want to move. But I guess Brad Stevens knows a lot more about basketball than I do, so there's also that.
It honestly just might be health related and not wanting
Okay,
and
they just
having.
never try. They don't trust him to stay healthy
Yeah,
for
I
a
think because
season long
he
term.
did it. And that's the thing. Even last year, as they were heading into the postseason and stuff,
Yeah,
he wasn't healthy. So I think
fair
that's
enough.
always that's always the big concern. But I don't know. Maybe they have some guard options on their roster. Maybe they want to open up more minutes for a guy like Peyton Pritchard, who's been good.
Hmm.
And they added a couple of guys this off season who maybe they're trying to squeeze into the rotation. But yeah, I think he's. I've always loved Malcolm Brogdon. I just
Yeah,
think
he's a good
when
player.
he is healthy, he's a great piece to have. So I don't know why there's a sense of urgency to deal him other than potentially the concerns with injuries. So I guess we'll just keep an eye on whether or not that continues to gain any traction or if he just remains with the team. Okay. So otherwise, that's your weekly bullet points. There's other stuff happening around the league, but those are some of the bigger things, some bigger names. Health is positive for the most part. Like you said, best shape of their life for a lot of these
Oh yeah,
guys coming
love it.
into training camp. And now we should move on to what the basketball gods tell us we have to talk about. And that is the Damian Lillard trade. So here's the thing. I want to start with the Damian Lillard trade by just giving you this is what the finalized trade was.
Yeah, because there was a lot of it wasn't just Lillard for a bunch of picks. There's a lot of people going a lot of different directions.
Right. It was honestly
the Suns finally got rid of DeAndre Ayton.
I know, and honestly there were a lot less picks involved in this type of trade than would have been expected, and that and a team like Miami was willing to offer. Like it seems like they were willing, based off reports, that they were willing to offer more picks. But yeah, the trade was less pick heavy and more player heavy, which is rare, obviously, in today's league. So Milwaukee obviously ends up with Damian Lillard. That's it. That's their addition. Pretty big one. Then Portland. Yeah, Portland for Damian Lillard. They end up acquiring DeAndre Ayton, Drew Holiday, Tamani Kamara. I don't even know. I didn't.
No idea who that is.
I should, but I don't. So that was a name that must have been just thrown. That was thrown in for salary purposes. To a 2029 first round pick via Milwaukee that's unprotected, and then 2 unprotected 2028 and 2030 pick swaps. So here's the deal. Then the Suns, I guess I should say, the Suns end up getting Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson. Now, I think before we go into any specific thoughts on Lillard and Milwaukee, let's just start with the Suns and Portland.
Sure.
I think that for Portland, some people initial response was not a great return. I mean, you get DeAndre Ayton, which clearly they wanted him and they were high on him, and that's a former number 1 overall pick, still very young,
still a very good player, and I might have just needed a change of scenery. Like he wasn't bad in Phoenix, he just didn't like it there. Like it just wasn't working.
Right. He's still only 25 years old, and I think he really is a perfect change of scenery candidate. You talk about a guy like we see players all the time just have to find the right situation and they end up thriving. And you look at a guy like Lauri Markkanen and from last season and what he was able to do, finally ending up in Utah where the pressure's off and the ball is his. Now in Portland, the pressure will definitely be off on DeAndre Ayton, which I think could be a huge help. And there will be some other scorers, some other young guys there. But I think this is that's kind of a perfect place for him. He's their center of the future. He's honestly going to come in far more experienced than a lot of the pieces that they have that they're building around. So he'll go from being, the young, kind of inexperienced, probably didn't feel like he had much of a voice on Phoenix to, being looked at as more of a veteran.
Be a go-to guy in the locker room. Yeah.
Yeah. And more of a veteran presence and somebody who is comparatively to at least guys like Shaedon Sharpe, Scoot Henderson, as they go through their bumps in the road as young players, you're probably going to get a lot more consistency and just good production, I think, out of Ayton. So
agreed.
For Portland, that let's not forget how big that piece is for them. And he's only 25. They're building something that he's a piece that you can obviously continue to build around. And we shouldn't forget how they clearly value him highly. And that was a big part of this trade. Then they get Drew Holiday, right? So the Drew Holiday situation is clearly we want this asset and we like him better than taking on, let's say, Miami's first round picks, because Miami's a good organization. They're always good. We don't know how valuable those are going to be down the road. So let's take Drew Holiday, and then Joe Cronin now with Portland, their general manager, he gets to flip Drew Holiday into whatever he wants. So I think that's an approach. I like that approach. It's an approach that I think we've kind of seen teams take a little more often now, where they're like, okay, yeah, we'll take that player, a good veteran player, and now we'll decide what the other trade looks like that includes him, because we can build the assets. So that's why it's hard to fully evaluate Portland's deal as of now, because whatever they get for Drew Holiday is going to be, that's when you can more look at this as a complete trade.
What do you think that return kind of looks like? Because I apologize, I didn't read the article yesterday, but I did see your post about him being was it him interested in the Bulls, or there was some sort of mutual interest there? Like, as a Bulls fan, if Lonzo is obviously out for probably the rest of his career, or at least Bulls contract, and your missing link is a point guard who can play well defensively, who can distribute the ball, shoot threes. Like Drew Holiday should be a guy that you would think, who's also been a part of a winning culture in Milwaukee, who's played alongside Javon Carter for a long time. Like that guard rotation works. Isn't that a piece that you would want to go out and get? And do the Bulls have the assets to go out and make that happen?
Right. Well, I think to answer that's just the first part. If that's an asset you want, I think Drew Holiday. It makes so much sense.
He makes all the
Chicago.
sense in the world for the Chicago Bulls.
I think basically next to, and I mean Drew Holiday is a better player than Lonzo Ball. Let's first make that clear. But next to what Lonzo, like filling that Lonzo hole, if you asked me what player in the league would you grab to fill the hole that Lonzo had for you, he would probably be like the first name that I would choose.
Yeah, and
because he's basically he's another version of he's a better version of Lonzo in a lot of ways.
And we talked about last year, Patrick Beverley coming in as a buyout like late in the season and kind of changing the culture and being that little bit of a spark plug. Like Drew Holiday is a tough basketball player. He's tough to play against. He kicks your ass defensively. Like that's what he's the same type of move that you brought in Patrick Beverley for, except he's also a really good point guard. No offense to Patrick Beverley. He shouldn't be a starting point guard in the NBA. He's an off the bench defensive sub energy guy. Like Holiday gives you some of that in the form of a legitimate NBA championship winning starting point guard.
Well, so what he would do for Chicago, and we don't need to go too far on a tangent, but this is something that we should talk about because, yes, you brought up the connection there. Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald listed a couple of teams that he's heard Drew Holiday has interest in joining. The Miami Heat were one of them, the Los Angeles Lakers and Clippers, the Boston Celtics, the 76ers, and Chicago was surprisingly on there. I do want to say I haven't seen this report followed up by, Brian Windhorst on ESPN. He was talking about it and he did not name Chicago as part of it. But that was from the flip side of which teams are interested in Drew Holiday. It wasn't, which teams are Drew Holiday interested in, which is the Heat, LA teams, Boston, Chicago, Philly. It was more which teams are interested in going after Drew Holiday. So, still, there's a connection there, and I think with Chicago, they should have interest in going at him. Now, whether or not they can pull it off is the bigger question. They don't really, unless you're trading one of the big two of LaVine and DeRozan, there's really no way to make this deal work, especially they're hard capped, which so you have to offload one of those bigger salaries to take him in. And otherwise, they have the young talent in the picks to probably entice a team like Portland. But yeah, you need to get rid of a guy like LaVine or DeRozan, and there's no use in getting rid of LaVine to take Drew Holiday. Now, I made a case in the article that I wrote over at Bleacher Nation that if you were going to do this and you wanted to get rid of DeRozan and take Drew Holiday, I think that is something that at least makes some sense because DeRozan's up for a new contract. It completes
your roster a little bit more too.
Right.
It gives you a little bit more of a balanced roster. Is what you want to try.
Drew is 1 year younger than DeMar. He is, he's up for an extension next year, but under contract next year because it's a player option, which I'm assuming he'll pick up if he gets the extension or whatever. And then DeMar is up. He's an unrestricted free agent next summer. So, and if the goal is to keep winning for Chicago, if they want to keep pushing forward, then Drew is that piece that you throw in there and he answers your starting point guard problem. He makes a lot of sense next to Zach LaVine. He just kind of he completes that roster a little bit more, and the fit I think between him and a guy like LaVine and Vucevic is a little bit more organic than the DeRozan, LaVine, Vucevic combo. With that said, I can't sit here and say that improves the team that much, because DeRozan's still an amazing player, and while I think there might be a little more cohesion, we're still talking about a team that might cap out at a first round exit. So you still make those moves, but the question, of course, is what are the other moves that's happening with it? And it's just hard to see a path where adding him makes the team a whole lot better unless there's other changes coming with it. So the ideal scenario for them would be replacing Lonzo basically with Drew, and they still have DeMar and Zach, because then you have a really good team, I think, then. Not a contending team, but a team that can get to a second round series because you have those three guys, and Vucevic, you have those four, which just make a lot of sense together. But going to the second question or whatever, with that you were asking, what is Drew Holiday going for, though, and just the open market in general? I think it's a good question. I think Portland is prepared to just wait and and potentially see into the season, like which team's
Yeah,
desperate for a
that's
guard.
not. They don't need to get rid of him ASAP. Like that's a guy. Like they
No.
just picked up. They just drafted Scoot Henderson. Like we're talking about DeAndre Ayton being a veteran leader in the locker room. Like if you want to hang on to him for a little bit and you don't like offers, you have Drew Holiday, alongside your young potential superstar point guard to kind of be a little bit of a, if he wants to be a little bit of a mentor, at least learn from and like be in that roster, be in that locker room for a little while, and then you can trade him when you want. But having him around your group is not a bad thing for half a year.
Yeah, no, not at all. And so I think his value could just potentially go up depending on if there's a team has an injury, if a team just as the reality of the season sets in, teams are willing to give up more and more. So
Hmm.
maybe the value only goes up there. But yeah, it's hard to say. I would have to imagine that he's the type of player that's at least worth another young talent and a couple picks. Like we shouldn't forget how good he is. He is an all
Hmm.
NBA first team defensive guard. He's an all defensive first team guard. He's
Hmm.
made it. I think he's had 3 all NBA all defensive first team nods since 2018. He is averages like 9. I think last season he averaged maybe the second highest points of his career. I could pull it up, but regardless, like he's only gotten better and better, honestly, with age.
Yeah.
And he's a good on ball scorer for you. That's only gotten better with age in a lot of ways. And yeah, so I just think that there's a team that could really give up a good haul. If we're talking 2 more picks, maybe one unprotected, one semi-protected, and a young player of some kind. Like let's say Miami, who has been reported to wanting him. What if they offered, Hero and 2 picks? Like that's an
Yeah.
amazing. I think that'd be a great return for Portland. Now I think Hero on that team with Shaden Sharp and Scoot Henderson is a bit of a question mark, but regardless, like that would be a suitable return. A young player, 2 picks. If you're able to get that, I think that's a really, really solid return for Holiday. So yeah, so overall, going back to just for Portland, that's what you get in return. And then you get those Bucks picks, which we mentioned, right? The 2029 first round pick, unprotected, and then 2028 and 2030 pick swaps.
Those could be important.
All 3 of those could be huge. Like, let's not forget the value of a pick swap. It's not just straight up additional first round pick, but the Bucks could, in 2029, Giannis is going to be in his mid 30s and Dame's going to be in his
Might
late
not
30s.
be a Buck anymore.
Right. And those 2 players are going to be in their mid to late 30s. The Bucks could easily be. Now you run the risk because they could be good. Who knows? Maybe they, whatever, something happens. They end up finding another star, but there's a good chance that the team stinks. And you're in 2029, you have their pick and your pick.
Yeah.
But then 2028, 2030 pick swaps, like those could be huge pick swaps.
It's always entertaining to see obviously that's the right move for the organization, but like guys making moves to get the pick 7 years down the road, like you might not be the general manager 7 years down the road.
Yeah, that's true.
But like it's absolutely the move you have to make because like the Bucks first round picks coming up don't really matter. They're all just lottery tickets at the end of the first round.
Right, and they're gone already. So I think.
Oh, that's also correct.
No, yeah, I think most of them are. They were gone for the Drew Holiday trade originally and everything. So I just think that. Yeah, but I those late round picks for Milwaukee. If there's any team I think in the league that you want to start grabbing those late 2020 picks and early 2030 picks coming up here, it's Milwaukee, it's the Lakers, it's these older teams that have been kind of building something for a while now, Golden State. Like those are the picks that you want. So and we especially with all of the questioning of whether Giannis will stay in Milwaukee, the Lillard stuff obviously changes that. But like we just said, regardless of if they do stay in Milwaukee, we're talking about mid to late 30-year-olds here. So that's going to change things a lot. And both of those players aren't going to be the same guys at that point.
By the time those picks comes up, Dame's going to be 39, I think, or whatever it is. So might not even be in the league anymore.
Right. Yeah. And I think in his 38th season, I think when he's 38 years old is when he'll be making like that 60 something million, or maybe it's like when he's 37. I don't know.
Seems like a good year to play and then see you later.
Yeah. Okay. And then so for the Suns, before we get to Milwaukee, the Suns end up trading Ayton for Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Nasir Little, Keon Johnson. I don't know. I've been gone back and forth with this because at the end of the day, I think we all knew the Ayton thing was just kind of not going to happen there. Like, it wasn't a good spot for him. They clearly weren't on the same page with DeAndre Ayton about wanting to continue to build with him and moving forward. And earlier in the offseason when there were Ayton rumors and going back to last year's deadline and stuff, like that was a lot of the talk was, okay, do they trade him just for depth, for, you know, a slew of guys that can be added to a rotation? And that's clearly what they got here. And I think when you have Booker, Durant, and Bradley Beal, the depth was bad this offseason. And I mean,
it's what we talked about. It was a problem. Like they were really good with those three, maybe four, but then after that, it was just kind of like almost like the Heat the first year they had the big three. It was like Zydrunas Ilgauskas was like your next, like they didn't have much behind those three guys. I think this move did wonders for them, expanding that and getting them some actual NBA players for their depth.
Yeah, because I think I think they did better in the offseason than some expected them to do. But we're still talking about like but the expectation was so low because we were like, what are you gonna get? How are you gonna be able to afford guys? So some of the guys they did sign to minimum deals, Yuta Watanabe, who shot over 40% from three last year. That ended up, they ended up getting him, which felt like a pretty good addition to throw onto the bench, all things considered. And they end up signing. They get a guy like Bull. They retain Damian Lee. They get Keita Bates-Diop, who not a huge name, but had a really solid year with the Spurs last year. So they filled out with a couple of these like minimum players that you're like, oh, okay, that's at least a guy that has played a little, and it's better than what I thought they'd get. But you still, if any of those guys stunk, like no one was going to be surprised. So now you at least get some other names, some other players to throw into the rotation. Metu was another guy they signed who I should have mentioned, who had actually a very good year last year and was a sneaky good signing. And then, of course, Eric Gordon, that was the big one. They were surprised that no one thought that they'd be able to get Eric Gordon. So that's kind of what saved their summer in a lot of ways is, they actually got a legitimate, potentially, guy who can close for them in lineups, and Eric Gordon for very, very cheap. But yeah, as for Nasir Little, Yusuf Nurkic, Keon Johnson, and the guys that they got in this trade, like you said, Grayson Allen, those are all guys who maybe not Keon Johnson. He's still super young and developing, but the other guys are players who can play for them right away. Yeah. And Yusuf Nurkic had a bad year last year. He's really struggled in recent years. I don't love the idea of them buying into him as their starting center, but apparently they think he fits better than Ayton. I don't fully understand that because defensively, Ayton makes a lot more sense next to a team that doesn't play any defense. But Nasir Little could be okay on that end. Grayson Allen's an above average defender and he's a good shooter. As much as I don't like the guy. And
I'm just glad he's not on the Bucks anymore. I don't want to see him.
Yeah, I don't want to see him 4 times a year. So it is, it is what it is. Like it's clearly what they wanted. They wanted to get off Ayton. They got some rotation talent, and it fills out things around Booker and Beal and Durant. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's around those guys. Really, that was gonna have to. It's just all gonna come down to what they do anyway. Yeah. So, I do think missing Ayton defensively could be a big issue. But we'll see what happens.
Very possibly, but he it also wasn't working in the locker room there, and at some point you kind of have to, if it's not working in the locker room, that's going to mess things up on the court too. So it's probably just cut the cord. He's gone.
What grade would you give both those teams, Portland and the Suns?
Oh man, I think probably like B pluses. I think they got something for DeAndre Ayton, like they were able to move him and get some pieces back that they like, and clearly
they got 2 young guys. Nasir Little, Keon,
they got some young, like they got young pieces. I think Portland did pretty well. Like the future pick, obviously the future picks don't kick in for a few years, but like those are going to be valuable picks when the time comes. And then the ability, like you pointed out, not just taking a random first round pick here, but to take on Drew Holiday and be like, all right, now I can kind of control this asset, maybe maximize that one. You're going to make a lot of progress, I think, there. So I would say probably B pluses. And then I think I'm going to give Milwaukee an A because I think they bring in another superstar. They're bringing in their big fish to go play alongside Giannis. They just ensured that Giannis is probably pretty happy because they made a move to go be a championship team when he's been saying all summer he wants to be in Milwaukee, but he also wants to win a title. Like that's the move they went out and made. And I have to hop up for 10 seconds. I will be right back, but keep talking.
Go for it. I think okay. So basically, I think those are two fine, acceptable grades. B pluses around the board. I think I would give Portland a B. That's where I think they sit right now, just because we need to see what they do get for Drew Holiday. Now we're assuming baseline they're going to get something decent for Drew. So that's why I'm comfortable giving them that B minus. And for me, it can go creep higher depending on what they get for Drew. And then for the Suns, I probably would settle on I'd go a letter grade below you, C plus, maybe B minus. It just all depends for me on how those guys help them this year. And, because, yes, Ayton was, it probably wasn't happening for him there. I get that. It's just this year, looking at that roster, I still think he helps them more than any of these guys they got and any of these guys combined.
Fair point.
I think that he could potentially help them more than that. So I think it's just going to have to be a wait and see with that. But yeah, I think that's it's clear they just wanted to move him, and they're also off the money now, which helps them. I mean, they gave him a big contract 2 summers ago. So they're already super expensive, and that at least saves them a little bit of money by moving Ayton's contract. They take on Nurkic's contract, which is awful, but it is what it is. Nurkic's will end sooner. So yeah, I like C plus for the Suns, I think. And then Portland, I give it like a B, a solid B until
solid B.
It can move up to a B. Yeah, it can move up to a B plus, even A, depending on what the Drew
Holiday deal
return is. But I think, like I said, a lot of people were shocked with this deal for multiple reasons. And we can talk about the Bucks. We'll talk about the Bucks thing in a second. But they were shocked because it wasn't that pick heavy deal. There was rumors that Miami was going to go 3 first-round picks and Tyler Hero. But again, Tyler Hero's rerouted somewhere else in that. I guess maybe the Portland can get even more picks if Hero goes to the Nets or somebody, and then they get some of maybe some Suns picks or something in return. And it just comes down to what do you want? And I think Joe Cronin in Portland here, they like their young guys. It's never bad to add more draft capital, but I think they like Dayton. They'll probably add more draft capital with Drew. And I just don't mind not taking the Heat deals because I'm not in the business of really wanting Heat picks all that much anyway. And maybe there was some saltiness and bitterness that could have also been a motive there.
Yeah, I'm kind of I talked about it when the first kind of forced the trade. I think it was on one of our first shows, and I just kind of hate how players have been oftentimes put general managers in those situations. I only want to go to this team. I'm kind of happy the GM won here. It feels like
sure, yeah.
I'm happy they won because if you do end up trading Miami, it's helping to set a precedent, or I should say, keep that precedent up. And I think this is good for the future. This shows GMs that you can still just not listen to the player and make a deal and get a good offer. Yeah, no,
I definitely. So moving on to we'll talk about the Bucks. We'll talk about the Lillard side of this. Like you said, A, all around, definitely an A. I think losing Drew for my fiance, major Bucks fan. She, she was, let's just say she was pumped about this. But at the same time, she was, I'm sure many Bucks fans were beaten up about the fact that Drew's leaving. She's been a big Drew fan ever since, he arrived. And I have many videos of her freaking out when he has that massive steal in Game 5 of the Finals, when he makes a massive defensive play. For some reason, I just have a knack for knowing when he's about to do something, and then I would film her reaction, and I always catch it right at time. So she loved Drew, and I think that's probably reflective of how a lot of Bucks fans feel, and how Giannis, who had some comments to Bleacher Report, and Chris Haynes, how he feels. It's a bittersweet moment because I think early on this season there's going to be some moments for Bucks fans where they are very much missing Drew Holiday, and that's because of what he does defensively. I know that we all know how good Drew is defensively, but I don't think all Bucks fans maybe are going to know how not good Damian Lillard is defensively. So when you just go from being used to watching Drew guard players every single night to moving and watching Damian Lillard guard players every night, it's going to be a pretty rude awakening, in my opinion. And there's going to be nights early on where they have to get used to what that looks like. So obviously that creates a somewhat big hole, but your thought process, of course, is you have Giannis, a defensive player of the year. You have Brook Lopez, a borderline defensive player of the year last year. You got some other solid role players. Jay Crowder, if he can begin to step back up, good defensive player. And there should be enough there to cover some more liability, some more holes and liabilities in the front court. But it will be something, I think, to keep in mind. Other than that, however, there's really nothing not to like about this addition for Milwaukee. As good as Holiday is on both ends, as good as Holiday has shot the ball over the past 3-4 years of his career, nobody is Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is the second best shooter in the league behind Stephen Curry, and he gives you an option now next to Giannis in the half court in particular that I have to see it, but I can't even comprehend how anyone would stop them because
it's going to be tough.
It's
going to be tough.
It's just, I think it's I just think it's the best duo in the league already. And I could be wrong with that as we continue to see how this year develops. But it's just so hard for me not to think that that's the perfect fit between those two players, because not only is Giannis obviously as dominant as he is down low and inside, but now you're adding, Lillard, who running, pick and rolls with Giannis. What are you doing? How
do you cover that?
Yeah, what are you doing? I don't understand what you're doing. I don't understand what the coverage is. It's a pick your poison thing. That's one of the worst pick your poison options in the league. So yeah, it's just, for me, and that's immediately where my brain went when I just saw it. When I saw the Woj tweet happen, I was in the rain walking my dog, had to sprint back home. It was just sprint back home trying not to pee myself, because I just couldn't believe the trade to begin with, that Milwaukee even pulled this off with the assets that they had, and that they even went for it, because Drew was such a big piece of what they did. But just immediately imagining okay, I don't know how anybody stops these two. And of course,
the way to stop the Bucks was Giannis either needs to be hurt. If Giannis is hurt, obviously, he was in the playoffs, you can slow him down. But teams just kind of started doing their best to focus on Giannis, take him away, and the Bucks offense would kind of get stagnant come playoff time. And teams can't do that anymore. Damian Lillard is capable of taking over any game he's in, and it's just a good luck trying to figure out how to stop those two.
Right, and I think what this really does for them is, I think we forgot how much this team struggled offensively at times. Yeah. And I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but this group come crunch time was, not what it used to be. And a lot of this was because of Chris Middleton. A lot of it was kind of a step back from him, and also some injuries. So now this takes a lot of pressure off Chris. This makes him a third option, on nights, scoring the ball instead of being that second guy that he's had to be in the past. And he's, I think, currently a more than serviceable third option. And it gives you just an option in crunch time, obviously, Dame time. And it gives you this better option than, okay, Giannis, in transition going full steam ahead at the rim, or half court Giannis backing up and charging at the rim. That's a lot of what we see from him. And it's because he's great at it, and it's what he's going to continue to do, and it's unstoppable. But it's not always, whether he gets hurt like we saw in the playoffs, or teams just build the wall, right? And what the Bucks have to rely on is when teams build that wall and they either foul Giannis and he's missing free throws, or they force Giannis to he decides to kick out on those. While the Bucks have been good at hitting their threes in the past, now they have the second best shooter in the NBA that he has to kick out to. And not only does that make putting more pressure on Giannis to try to stop him, that makes you want to do less of that, because the option that you're kicking out to. It just makes things that much more difficult. So 15th in the league last year for the Bucks on offense, so middle of the pack, nothing great. And
this helps.
This is definitely,
this helps.
Definitely gonna help. Lillard averaged 32 points per game last year. Let's not forget about that. And I think in his interview also with Chris Haynes, he mentioned, he's excited to be on a team where he's not the best player on the team anymore. And it's crazy to think about that because he's Damian Lillard. And it's crazy to think about what he could look like as just being the second guy in charge. He sounds ready to take on that role. He sounds okay to accept that role. And I think it's just funny, all the Miami Heat stuff too, that we've talked about in the past, because like his fit with Giannis is so much better than his fit with Jimmy. So I don't know why Miami or why the Bucks weren't immediately like on his list to begin with.
Maybe he just wanted to live in Miami.
I mean, that's definitely a good call there.
Not a bad place to live and be really, really rich.
Yeah, that's a good point. But in terms of also with like we said, the half court offense is just going to take a massive jump, and I think with especially like we said, playing in the pick and roll is going to be a big thing with the two of them. But just Lillard draws so much of the defense's attention when he's on the floor, but then so does Giannis, and I just don't. And one of those guys is always going to be open, or one of those guys is always going to likely have have the upper hand in whatever matchup they're in. So I trying to even think about what teams can match up with them defensively. It's really hard to pick. I mean, maybe a team like Cleveland, who has they have a guy like Mobley who can go on Giannis, and then Garland's a good defender. He can try to hang with Lillard. So like maybe that's a team that has some options to throw at them. Boston obviously has some solid defensive wings, but they took a hit with the absence with Marcus Smart leaving, and then Porzingis, he's a decent shot blocker, but like he can't hang with Giannis. He can't guard Giannis by any means. But yeah, as you just go up and down the list here, and it's just hard to find any team that has the firepower to throw anything really at that Bucks group, which is why they immediately trade for Lillard and they jump up to the favorites to win the title. So
yeah. They're favorites to win the title now too.
I think so. Was it just coming out of the East? They went over, but let's see if they have the futures up. I think it was for East.
I would imagine they become favorites to win the East after that for sure. But let's see.
Yeah, I think they overtook Boston. I don't know about for sure the title, but I feel like they may have moved into first for the title. But if you're checking that, what I will the other stuff that I'll say here is the interesting report from Adrian Wojnarowski over at ESPN was that the Bucks actually didn't run this deal by Giannis before they decided to do it. Which
the Bucks are now NBA title favorites, by the way.
Yeah, I got to imagine. Yeah, it's just, I mean, I'm sure they were top three as is without Lillard. So yeah,
but they are one.
Right. And I should say, of course, there's always growing pains, right? These two are going to have to figure out how to play together. Lillard usage is going to have to drop pretty significantly from what he's used to, at least. It's like I said, it sounds like he's excited for that. At least he's going to have help that he's never helped before. But this can't be. You don't want to take the ball out of Giannis's hands too much because, at the end of the day, he is arguably the best player in the league. So the chemistry between those two is going to have to work itself out. The making sure it's not too much your turn, my turn, and it's more playing off one another is going to be a big thing. You don't want too much of, this is Giannis's possession and Giannis is just going to go charge at the rim like he always does. And
they don't seem like ego guys that are going to be worried about that.
I don't. Yeah, I definitely don't think so. I think there will be a good chemistry there, but I just think that working it out can always be, that could always take some time. Yeah, so that will be what to watch for. If there's some nights where it looks a little bit ugly on offense, especially as they get acclimated with the role players as well, because that is what Drew did so well. And it's not that Dame isn't a good facilitator; he obviously is, but he's a score first guy. He's getting you buckets. And Drew, while he's gotten, I think, better and better at just hunting his own shot and creating his own shot off the dribble, he is more of that pass first, keep everybody in motion guy. So that's going to be a little bit more of what Dame has to take on in this offense to make sure it's not just it's the Giannis Lillard show, but you have to get everybody involved and also make sure Chris Middleton's involved and things like that. So seeing who's going to be that facilitator will be part of the learning process and part of getting everybody acclimated. Again, Lillard will be the facilitator, but just seeing how much he can balance his ability to score versus setting up his now 2 other All-Star teammates. Yeah, but going back, they didn't run the deal by Giannis, which I thought was like, what do you think of that? Because I think the reasoning was, we know he loves Drew, and we don't want to make him feel like he has to decide.
Like he's signing off on trading Drew Holiday. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off for him.
Right. So but I still think I was like, I don't know. I feel like you still have to bring it to him.
I might have maybe a phone call, not to like ask him if he's cool with it, but just kind of like tell him like, hey, this is happening. Like, this is just so you know, you're not going to find out from Woj.
Like, you didn't do it yet, but you could just say it like, hey, it's happening, like before it actually happens. Just
like this is about to happen. Just so when you see it on Twitter, that's you're hearing it from us. You're not surprised, but we got to do this.
But then if he gets really angry, then you have a chance to still stop it right before.
Yeah, you can still pull the plug.
Yeah, I still think if you ran it by him, I have to imagine after everything he said this offseason and stuff,
he'd have to sign off.
That he'd still sign off on it. We know also, like, all this stuff has surfaced over the past 2 days of him picking Lillard first at the All-Star game, and Lillard saying that he would want to play with Giannis if he had to pick anybody, in an interview in the past. And so there's all this stuff, and apparently they've talked in the past about like linking up and things like that. So there's clearly a relationship and a mutual respect there. And, but I am curious about like a little bit more of what I just would love to we'll never hear it, but I'm just curious a little bit more of what his thoughts are. Cause I think the big thing for Giannis too has always been like, he doesn't really want that super team thing. And Lillard kind of hasn't really wanted that super team thing either. And now this is like a super team duo at least. And
it's not the true super team though. It's a duo, not a trio.
It's not Booker, Durant, and Beal. Yeah. You're right. It's definitely more of, it's just a duo. And then, like we said, Chris, as good as Chris Middleton is, he's not like a superstar.
No,
he's your solid number 3 for sure. So it definitely still different. But I wonder how both of them feel a little bit. Like if they feel a little icky about it, they're just like, I wanted to do this on my own. Giannis already did it on his own.
I think they'll feel okay. Lillard knows. I think he tried doing it on his own, knew it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And if he did, he wouldn't have wanted to go to Miami because he'd be, even if you're Batman to Jimmy's Robin, which no one is Batman to Jimmy's Robin when he's on the team, is like, that's still a duo.
Right. So that was just interesting. The didn't run it by him thing, but I get it. He loves Drew, and if he's, it is an emotional guy who loves his guys, like it's going to be hard for him to give you much of an answer. So I guess if you're the front office, just do it. And Lillard's a good enough player that he'll be okay with it. So yeah, the other big thing that we can kind of wrap up with is, what's going to be the fallout now of this getting done. I think there's a couple things to keep an eye on here moving forward. One is, does this open up the floodgates with some other deals? Now, since media day and training camp is literally next week, my guess would be no, that there's not too
probably
many.
Not yet.
Yeah, there's probably not too many other things that we see, but if they rush to get a James Harden thing done now? How fast is Drew Holiday moved? That's of course something that we need to watch. And in those deals, specifically with Harden, does it also formulate into a multi-team deal of some kind where these teams that weren't able to get in on the Lillard, in the Lillard sweepstakes, they weren't able to win. Miami, Brooklyn, some of these squads, like, not saying they go after Harden, but do they try to get in on the trade to add some other assets or some other players to kind of make up for missing out on Lillard? I think will be something to keep an eye on. And then another thing would be Jeremy Grant. I'm a little interested in seeing, because Portland now with some of their they got rid of Nurkic, like we said, they got rid of, Nasir Little was a young guy. He just was going to be hard for him to find some playing time with the other.
He didn't really have a role anymore, or he had a much diminished role, I should say.
Yeah, I think there wasn't going to just be as much opportunity as someone like him might want. And so I think that's why they were okay kind of moving on from him. But, the Portland has, they have still Jeremy Grant, who just signed a huge deal. So it's going to be hard to move him. But once he is tradable, which I don't know the exact, usually comes if you're signing in the offseason, probably might be December. You can't trade him until then. But once he's available, do they try to trade him pretty quickly? And other than that, the team's, pretty young. Like that's their last like veteran guy that they, other than Drew Holiday, obviously now if he sticks around, but that would be their last kind of veteran presence in this rebuild. And I don't think he's a bad one to have. Like if he wants to be the guy and continue to score a bunch of points like he did in Detroit, like he can.
I was going to say he's been in this, he's done this before. He knows what this is like.
He can kind of do that, but maybe he is, he is somebody. He's obviously signed that contract kind of before James' trade request, was thinking that he'd be winning some more games. So maybe he wants to get out and wants to go somewhere else. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. I just think it might be really hard to trade that contract.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's a massive deal.
Yeah. And yeah, the East in general now is obviously it's kind of shaken up. The Bucks were always going to be at the top regardless of if they had, if they had Damian Lillard or not. But because Miami doesn't get Lillard, where do they go from here? Do they fall off? Are they struggling to stay in the playoff picture? Like we said, Brooklyn's a team to watch. Philly, who was also always interested in adding Dame, like what do they do now? Because they're losing Harden. We've talked about them in the past. It's just going to be the Embiid show, and who's going to be their co-star that they put next to him. The Knicks, I think, not that they were necessarily in the Lillard sweepstakes, but they have the assets to trade for a big star. So is there now a greater sense of urgency knowing that the Bucks are revamped and back at the top? Is there a greater sense of urgency to join that mix faster? So yeah, I just think that there's a lot of dominoes that will continue to fall. There's no doubt in my mind that teams around the East are rethinking some things, and because they have to, for one, if they missed out on Lillard, but two, just because the Bucks are that much better now. And the question for them is, okay, how do we keep changing? How do we make sure that we're staying one step ahead and we add somebody that allows us to compete with the Bucks and Bostons of the world?
Yeah, the East just doesn't feel as open as it was when we, started doing this show a few months ago. Like the Bucks were obviously had question marks. The Celtics had they're a very good team, but still had some question marks, not being able to finish the job in the playoffs. Now it seems like, all right, it's probably just coming down to the Bucks and the Celtics.
Right. I think the middle of the pack is definitely open. It's honestly, it's open all the way up to like the 3 spot just because of Philly and we don't know exactly what that will look like. So kind of, I think like 10-3 is pretty open, but like you said, Bucks and to me, Bucks and Celtics are just, especially come playoff time. Maybe they don't finish in the top 2, who knows? But when we're talking postseason basketball, teams that I trust and I'm tiering everybody, for me, the tiers are like, it's Milwaukee, Boston up high. And then, you're getting into that Philly, Cleveland, the people that finished 3rd and 4th last year. And they're kind of in their own tier. But that second tier is, I think, far below.
Yeah, the separation the separation was increased quite a bit after this deal, I think, from that top tier to the second tier in the East.
Right. Okay. Well, we took a break from our division digest this week. We didn't get to talk Northwest Division. That's okay. We'll do it next week. I know everyone's just dying for all this division digest, so we'll get back.
The Blazers section just got a little bit more interesting,
right? Yeah,
in the Northwest Division.
Yeah. So we're going to we're going to get back into that next week, return to our division previews. Otherwise, hopefully I don't want to add to the Lillard stuff has been overwhelming. I get it. There's been a lot of it, but we have to talk a little bit about it. Hopefully we talked maybe even a little more about it from the other perspectives than just Lillard going to Milwaukee, because we get it. We get how impactful that is. But it's also, this is a big deal for the other teams as well that were
absolutely
a part of it, and for the rest of the league. So that's that. Matt, I hope you have a good weekend ahead. You've had a busy past couple of days. I hope you get to.
If you're in Kentucky, go sign up for all their get to Bleacher Nation or BetSperts or 4for4 and start signing up for some sports books. Come on.
Yeah, if Points on the Podcast has a giant presence in Kentucky,
I'm sure we do.
Yeah, you can.
Big basketball state.
Yeah, you Kentucky folks, go to BleacherNation.com. There's tons of promos for you to sign off on. So go there, and that will lead you to the promised land, and you can bet a ton of money on the Milwaukee Bucks to win the NBA championship. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us this week. We will be back next week when there is maybe a Drew Holiday trade or something. We'll see.
We'll see.